Hello everyone. Today's video is about human body cavity and their membrane. In my anatomical series, it is a part 5 video. So if this video is helpful to you, please like, comment and subscribe my channel and also share it with your friends. So let's start. So what is the definition of body cavity? Body cavity is a fluid filled compartment. Cavity means a compartment. When a compartment filled with a specific type of fluid inside the body that hold and protect our internal organ. This is called body cavity. Every body cavity are separated each other by specific type of membrane or any other structure that helps to protect our internal organs. So there is two types of body cavity present in our body. First of all, ventral cavity and second is dorsal cavity. See this figure, dorsal cavity and ventral cavity. Where ventral in our anatomy, ventral means the front part of the body. So the cavity which is present in the front part of the body is also called ventral cavity. The ventral cavity, it is made up of three types of the cavity. The upper part is thoracic cavity, the middle part is abdominal cavity and the below part is called the pelvic cavity. Then the second cavity, dorsal cavity. Where the dorsal means the backside of the body. So the cavity that is present in our backside is called dorsal cavity. This dorsal cavity is also composed of two cavity. First, the cranial cavity and second, the spinal cavity. The skull portion is called the cranial cavity and the spine portion is called the spinal cavity. So first, ventral cavity. It is the major body cavity which is present at the front of the body. I already discussed that the ventral in our anatomy, where the ventral refers to the front of the body. So the cavity which is present in the front of the body is also called the ventral cavity. It is also called the house of the internal organs or visceral organs because all of the internal organs are present in our ventral cavity. So the organ that is present in our ventral cavity are lung, heart, stomach, spleen, liver, pancreas, gallbladder, intestine and our reproductive organs. And the cavity also allows for the movement in size and shape of the internal organ for performing their function properly. For example, each of the organ like stomach, lung can expand or contract without destroying other tissue or disrupt the activity of any other organs. So the ventral cavity is one of the major body cavity in our body that is present in the front of the body, and it is also called the house of the internal organs. The organs mainly include heart, lung, liver, spleen, pancreas, gallbladder, intestine, reproductive organ. Mainly all of the main organs that is present in our body are present inside the ventral cavity. And this cavity is also helpful for the movement of all internal organs for performing their function properly. So it can divide it into two cavity. First of all, thoracic cavity and second is abdominopelvic cavity. So first I discuss about thoracic cavity, then abdominopelvic cavity. So first, thoracic cavity. It is the more superior subdivision of interior body cavity that is enclosed by the rib. See this picture that from here to here is included in our thoracic cavity, and below this is the abdominopelvic cavity. So it is the more superior subdivision of interior body cavity or ventral body cavity that is enclosed by a rib. This cavity fills the chest. Organs include heart, lung, trachea, esophagus, or bronchial tubes. Heart and lung, that is mainly located in our mediastinum. And the diaphragm, which is the types of the muscle that helps to separate the thoracic cavity from abdominopelvic cavity. And it also can be subdivided into three cavity. First, pleural cavity, second, mediastinum, and third, pericardial cavity. See this picture, the both side, mainly the lung portion is included in pleural cavity and the middle portion is called the mediastinum and pericardial cavity holds the heart. So first discuss about pleural cavity, then mediastinum and then pericardial cavity. First, pleural cavity. It is one of the smaller body cavity that is present within the thoracic cavity and it surrounds the lung. It is mainly called the house of the lung, and the lung that is protected by the pleural membrane. So the space present between the pleura is called the pleural cavity. As the lung is surrounded by the pleural membrane, that's why the space that is present between the pleura is called the pleural cavity. And this pleural cavity can be divided into the two cavity. First, left pleural cavity and second, right pleural cavity. Left pleural cavity, that is present the left side of the body, and it is also called the house of the left lung. And the right pleural cavity, that is present the right side of the body, it is also called the house of the right lung. Then mediastinum, that is present between our lung, left lung and right lung. So it contains the pleural cavity, trachea, esophagus, thymus gland and surrounds the remaining thoracic organs. It is located between the lung that I already say. Then pericardial cavity. It surrounds the heart, that is present within the mediastinum, and it is formed from the pericardium. Pericardium mainly a double membrane that surrounds the heart. So due to the presence of the pericardium membrane, this cavity is also called the pericardial cavity. Here the peri means around and cardi or cardial means heart. So the membrane that surrounds the heart is called the pericardium, and the cavity that covers the pericardium is called the pericardial cavity. After discussing thoracic cavity, then I will discuss about abdominal cavity. It is the largest body cavity in the body. This cavity fills the lower half of the trunk. It is separated from the superior thoracic cavity by the dome-shaped diaphragm, that is also a muscle that helps to separate the thoracic cavity from the abdominopelvic cavity. And there is no membrane between the abdominal cavity and pelvic cavity. This abdominopelvic cavity is mainly made up of abdomen and pelvic part of the body. So the part that contains the abdomen is called the abdominal cavity, and the part that contains the pelvic area, that is called the pelvic cavity. So in the between of abdominal cavity and pelvic cavity there is no membrane. So it can divide it into the two cavity, abdominal cavity and pelvic cavity. So first see this picture that the violet color areas are called the abdominal cavity and the greenish colored area is called the pelvic cavity. So first abdominal cavity that holds digestive organ like stomach, intestine, spleen, liver, kidney, pancreas, gallbladder, small and large intestine. And the abdominal cavity that is surrounded by the peritoneum, that is a double membrane. So the space that is present between this double membrane is called the peritoneal cavity. So the peritoneal cavity that is also included in the abdominal cavity. Then pelvic cavity, which is enclosed by the pelvic bone and it lies within the pelvis, and it holds the reproductive organs and the organs of excretion like urinary bladder, ureter, urethra, the lower part of digestive system, for example large intestine, mainly the sigmoid colon, rectum, anus. These are also included in the pelvic cavity. About abdominopelvic cavity that I already discussed in a long video, and I also share the link of this video in the comment section of this video and also in a description box. So after completing ventral cavity, start with dorsal cavity. It is one of the major human body cavity that is present at the posterior or the back of the body, and it holds our brain and spinal cord. And in this cavity it also includes both hand and the back of the trunk. It is mainly protects our nervous system, and it can be divided into two types. First cranial cavity and second spinal cavity. So the skull and the brain is mainly present in our cranial cavity and the spine is present in our spinal cavity. So start with cranial cavity. It is mainly fills the most of the upper part of the skull and it contains the brain. And this cranial cavity is protected by the bone of the skull and it is filled with the cerebrospinal fluid. Then spinal cavity, it is also called the vertebral cavity. It is a very long narrow cavity inside our vertebral column and it runs the length of the trunk, and it mainly contains our spinal cord and the spinal cavity that is protected by the vertebral column and it is filled with the cerebrospinal fluid. So see this figure that the greenish color part, that is mainly our skull part, is called the cranial cavity and the spine part is called the spinal cavity. So cranial cavity and the spinal cavity both are made dorsal cavity. So after discussing major body cavity, dorsal cavity and ventral cavity, there is some minor cavity. For example, oral cavity, nasal cavity, orbital cavity, middle cavity, synovial cavity. And I discuss about all of the minor body cavity very shortly. First, oral cavity, mouth and the cavities of the digestive organ is mainly included in oral cavity. Oral means mouth. Then nasal cavity, that is also called the sinus, that is located within and posterior to the nose. Then orbital cavity, that is the house of the eyes. Then middle ear cavity, that contains the bones and helps to transmit the sound vibration. Then synovial cavity, it is also called the joint cavity because between two bones there is a fluid that is called the synovial fluid. That's why it is called the synovial cavity. And it is also present between the vertebra. Now I discuss about the tissue membrane that surrounds our internal body cavity and organs. So start with the definition of tissue membrane. Tissue membrane, that is a thin layer of the cell that covers the outside of the body, for example skin, organs, for example heart, or internal passageway and the lining of the movable joint cavity. So the tissue membrane, it is a thin layer that covers our outside of the body, organs, or internal passageway and the lining of the movable joint cavity. So the dorsal cavity, that is protected by the three membrane, that is also called the meninges. First durameter, second arachnoid meter, and then pia meter. Mainly these three membrane are covers our dorsal cavity. Then the classification of the membrane. It can be divided mainly four types. First cutaneous membrane, second connective tissue membrane, third serous membrane, and fourth mucous membrane. Now I discuss about all of this membrane. So start with cutaneous membrane, that is present in the skin and it is a sterified squamous epithelium with keratin. So the keratin is present on the cutaneous membrane and it has the underlying dermis. Then connective tissue membrane, that is forms from connective tissue. The synovial membrane, that is also a type of the connective tissue that surrounds our shoulder, elbow and knee joints. This membrane secretes synovial fluid with lubricant for the movement of the joints. So due to the secretion of the synovial fluid, this membrane is also called the synovial membrane, which is a type of the connective tissue. And the connective tissue membrane that is present surrounds the kidney and the movable joints that helps to provide a smooth surface. Then ventral cavity, that is mainly surrounded by the serous membrane or serosa. So there I discuss about some point about serous membrane. So this membrane is mainly filled with the water serous fluid that helps the lubrication and the movement of the body organs. And this membrane lines the body cavity that is close to the exterior. It also closes the peritoneal, pleural and pericardial cavity. And the serous membrane is mainly made up of the single layer of the squamate epithelium serous membrane. Visceral membrane means the inner membrane and the parietal membrane means the outer membrane. Both secretes the serous fluid and it is also helps the movement of the organs without any friction. So depends on the location of the serous fluid means where the serous fluid is present. Depends on it. It also can be divided into the three types. Those are first parietal serosa that is present on the internal body wall. Second, visceral serosa that covers the internal organ. And third, serous fluid. Between these two layers means parietal membrane and the visceral membrane, there is a fluid filled serous membrane present and it helps separate the serous membrane or serosa. So the serous membrane mainly covers these three cavity. First pleural cavity, second pericardium cavity and third peritoneum cavity. First pleural cavity. The serous membrane that surrounds the pleural cavity and it covers the lung. Then pericardium, the serous membrane that surrounds the pericardial cavity that covers the heart. Then peritoneal cavity, the serous membrane that surrounds the peritoneal cavity and it also covers the organs of the abdominal cavity. Then last, mucous membrane. There is some points about the mucous membrane. The mucous membrane that lines all the cavity and open to the exterior. This membrane mainly composed of either sterified squamous or the simple columnar epithelium. And the mucus is produced by the epithelial exocrine gland that cover the epithelial layer. So, due to the production of the mucus fluid, this membrane is called the mucous membrane. It is also helps the absorption and the secretion and this membrane is present on the hollow passage that opens to the exterior environment. For example, digestive, reproductive, excretory and the reproductive tract. And there is a various types of the mucosa: nasal mucosa, oral mucosa, esophageal mucosa, bronchial mucosa, gastric mucosa, intestinal mucosa. So that's all. Our today's topic, body cavity and their membrane, is completed with detailed description. If any question or query, please comment it. And if this video is helpful to you, please like, comment and share it with your friends, and also subscribe my channel. Thank you everyone.